Lori and I have now been in Zambia for about 14 years. And when we first went to Zambia in 2004, we began by asking the question, how can we design a ministry that will make a long-term difference in Zambia, especially in terms of the kingdom of God? And in order to answer that question, you begin to look at the situation in which you're trying to work. You look at the environment. You look at the contextual factors. And as we begin to look at the situation in Zambia, there are several things that we began to realize that are important to answer that question. First one is the fact that we're working in a very poor country that is that has a very serious malnutrition problem. According to the UN, Zambia is the most malnourished country in all of Africa, second in the world behind Haiti. Now, the reason the people are so malnourished, in fact, chronic malnutrition, is not because the people are starving because of some long-term famine, although they do have periodic famines in most all of Africa, including Zambia. But the reason for the chronic malnutrition in Zambia is because they eat very little other than corn, which they call maize. And one of the things is the fact that in a climate such as Zambia, where you only get 4.5 months of rain each year, and it doesn't rain a bit, not a drop for 7 months, when you have such a short growing season and you have no refrigeration, then maize or corn is a very good crop to grow because it's easily stored. And when you want to eat it, you just take it and they pound it into kind of a millie meal, which looks a lot like turkey dressing, except it doesn't have any flavor and it's white. But they take that and they call it shima, and they will roll it up in their hands in kind of a little ball and dip it in some soup. And that means that about 85–90% of what they're eating is nothing but corn, nothing but starch. And so that is why they're so malnourished. That's why the Zambians are some of the smallest Africans you'll find. The children are also suffering from this malnutrition, and that is why the people of Zambia, including the children, are sick half of the time. And when there's some kind of disease that comes along, whether it's malaria or it is dysentery or some amoeba or whatever comes along, it kills so many of them because of this malnutrition. Now, you hear a lot in the news about trying to find a cure for malaria, and we're thankful for Bill Gates Foundation. It's been trying to make this a major project of theirs, and I hope they do find some kind of medicine that will help heal or cure malaria when people get it. But the thing is even if people even if we develop this medicine, malaria has a amazing ability to mutate, and then it becomes it becomes resistant to any kind of medicine. And about every 10 years, when they come up with medication, then it becomes it mutates and it becomes resistant to any of that medication. So even if we solve the problem of malaria with some kind of medicine, it's only going to last a short time. And as you begin to really look at what the problem is, you look deeper, you'll find that the real underlying problem is malnutrition in Africa. Because if, our American children, or even we Americans, get sick with malaria, we'll survive it 95% of the time, except perhaps for cerebral malaria. But Zambians are already so malnourished, and their immune system is so weak that when children in Africa gets malaria, it's easy for them to die from it. And that's why you hear 1 million children every year die of malaria in Zambia. So I really think if we're going to solve the problem of so many deaths from malaria, getting medicine would be good, but addressing the real problem of malnutrition would be even more important. So the first thing we need to realize is in Zambia, we're working in a very poor country. It is one of the poorest countries in the world. However, Zambia is also very receptive. 85% of Zambians claim to be Christian. In fact, Zambia is believed to be the second most Christianized country per capita in Africa. And a lot of people don't realize, but there's more people that attend church in Africa than in Europe and North America combined. In fact, based on the figures I've been able to come up with, it's 2 to 1. There are twice as many people that worship on Sundays in Africa than worship in North America and Europe combined. And so that what that means is that if you want to talk about where the center of Christianity is now, the gravitational center of the Christian world, it's no longer in America or in the Western world. It is now south of the equator, especially in Africa. Africa has become pretty much the center. And despite what you may be hearing, Islam's really not making all that many inroads into Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. Islam is in the north, but it's not really in the south, and it's not making much inroads into the south. Sub-Saharan Africa has gone overwhelmingly Christian. However, my big concern is that this Christian faith is extremely weak, is extremely anemic. Zambia, as I said a second ago, it is believed to be the second highest Christianized nation in Africa, but the quality of faith in Zambia appears to be among the lowest. As I've talked to other missionaries who've traveled throughout Africa and my own experience traveling through Africa, I find that Christianity, the quality of Christianity in Zambia is among the lowest. And so what we have in Zambia is what I say is profession without transformation. People go to church on Sunday in large numbers. And in fact, the president of the country has claimed Zambia is a Christian nation now. So we got a lot of people going to church, but they go to church on Sunday in order to get God to be happy with them so that he will bless them. And we're talking about here and now material blessings. So if I go to church and, I put some money in a collection plate and I worship God, and he's going to bless me because, I have kind of appeased him, or I've got him happy with me. Despite the fact that their life, they're immoral, they're involved in sexual immorality, or they're unethical in their business dealings, but they think because I go to church, that's God's going to bless me. They don't yet really understand that Christianity involves a life change, a major transformation of your character. But we shouldn't be too critical of Zambia because, Christianity has really only been in Zambia since World War II in any numbers. That's when Christianity really began to grow and flourish throughout all of Africa. So it hasn't been there very long. Christianity's been 2,000 years in the West, and yet we're still struggling to really become the kind of Christians that God would have us to be. So we shouldn't be too critical of the progress being made in Africa, considering we've really only been there about 75 years. But my concern is that it's a very good chance, if we're not careful, that Christianity could be snuffed out, like the seed that falls among the rocky places, or the thorns, as in the parable of the sower in Matthew 13. Is a question here: is Christianity really going to mature and continue to flourish in Africa, or might it end up just remaining superficial and they go from Christianity quickly into secularism like the rest of the Western world has moved? So that is my big concern, and that's why I feel such a calling as to why we ought to be in Zambia doing this work. And so we asked the question, why is Christianity so weak in Africa? Well, as I said, it's because it's only been there 75 years. But another very important factor, and this is true not just in the Churches of Christ, but across the Christian world in Africa, as I talked with other denominational missionaries and church leaders, is the key factor as to why Christianity really isn't maturing in Africa is because of a serious lack of leadership, spiritual leadership in Africa. The leadership is very poorly trained, is corrupt and immoral. They're preaching the gospel of prosperity. In other words, if you will give your money to the church, then God's going to bless you, and everybody knows that the money's going to go into the preacher's pocket. And half the preaching in Africa seems to be all about money all the time, because the preachers are struggling to get money and to survive themselves. So there's a real problem with developing spiritual leadership, and neither we in the Church of Christ or anyone else has done a very good job of developing spiritual leadership. And if we don't develop good leadership, there's really no hope for the church maturing in Africa. So as we look at this situation and we talk about how we can develop a ministry that will make a long-term difference in the kingdom of God in Zambia, we have developed this mission statement that we're there to train self-supporting spiritual leaders who are equipped for holistic rural ministry. Now, in this presentation, I'm going to go through and outline how we have developed a ministry to try to accomplish this mission statement. As I kind of diagram the nuts and bolts of our ministry, the different components, it kind of looks like what you see here in this diagram. And so I'm going to go through and talk about these different areas of our ministry, but I'm going to first begin on the right side, which is our humanitarian ministries, because they're also important in our Bible college training program. And I'll explain this as we continue through this presentation. So first, let me start with Karen's Kids Children's Ministry. This is a ministry that my daughter Karen, who's now 31 years old, has developed. She started this about 10 years ago when she began to see how many children are dying in the first 2-3 years of their life. And she just has a real passion for children and wanting to save the children. And so as we began to look at it, we first realized that 1/2 of children die in Africa before, and especially in Zambia, they die before they're 12 years old. But as we began to look deeper into this, we started realizing that most of the children are dying in the first 2 or 3 years of life. And the primary reason why this is happening is because something happens to the mother. The mother dies, or the mother is unable to nurse the child because she's so malnourished, or she becomes too sick with some disease herself. And then when that mother is not able to adequately nurse that child becomes malnourished. And they don't have a substitute to mother's nursing. Few people can, in Zambia or even in Africa, can afford to buy cows or have goats and cows and feed them. They're expensive. You have to have money to do that. And very few people in Zambia have goats and cows. And they can't afford cow's milk or goat's milk. And they certainly can't afford baby formula as a substitute because it costs $45, $50 a month. So what happens to these children, they don't get fed well or inadequately from their mother, and these children become malnourished, their immune system weakens, and then some disease like malaria or dysentery or any number of 100 things comes along, and it just quickly kills them. And that's why we're seeing so many children die in the first 2 or 3 years of their life. And then another problem that we're facing in Zambia, and as in most of Africa, is the transmission of HIV from the mother to the baby. It is estimated that about 25% of women of childbirth age in Zambia have HIV/AIDS. And if that mother nurses her child, which is her only option because there's no substitute for nursing, if that mother nurses her child, then there's a 25% chance that she will pass that virus to the baby, and the baby becomes sick with HIV/AIDS. So not only does the child become malnourished and the immune system weakens, and the child is also malnourished, which also further weakens the immune system, and therefore HIV quickly becomes full-blown AIDS, and then again, malaria or dysentery or whatever comes along and quickly kills these children. So that's another serious problem that we have. So what Karen tries to do, first of all, is she tries to provide baby formula for children who are at risk. She tries to provide baby formula for up to 2 years for these children. And then she tries to provide some protein-enriched foods to the mother if she sees that a mother is really suffering from malnutrition, because the mother's health is very vital to the survival of the children. So we want to keep that mother alive, and we want to see her become healthy if possible. So Karen will, once a month, she goes to the market and she buys in bulk a lot of food that's rich and high in protein. As in this picture, you see Karen buying a bunch of capentas, which are basically minnows, but they're high in protein. She also buys other vegetables like beans that are high in protein. And she will take that food. She buys the baby formula as well, and she will take that food and the baby formula, put it in her four-wheel drive, and it takes her usually a whole entire day to make her route. But she goes to all these mothers and families where the mother has died. She goes to the families, and she will deliver this food and this baby formula, a month's supply for them, and up for 2 years until that baby has become healthy and is weaned and can eat normal food. So those are two things that Karen does. But there's a third thing that she can do, and that is in certain cases, it's necessary for her to provide temporary residence in our children's care facility, which we call the baby house, because in some cases the family is too broken down, maybe the father is also dead and the mother has died, or the extended family is scattered and is not prepared to take in a child. Because you see in Zambia, the family, when they look at family, they don't think nuclear family. They think of extended family. So family to them is 30, 40, 50 people. And if the parents of a child dies, it is the responsibility of the uncles and aunts to take in that child and to raise that child on behalf of their brother and sister that has died. And it is a very big responsibility that the extended family has to do that. It's almost considered immoral, unthinkable that they would not do this. It is a family responsibility to raise children if the parents have died. And but in some cases, the family is too broken down or scattered, is not ready to take in the baby. And so in those cases, Karen has a new facility that we have just finished building. We're in the last stages of getting it certified with the government. But this facility will allow us to keep up to 30 babies. And this is only a temporary solution. We do not believe in long-term orphan care, although there in some cases needs to be some orphanages that care for children all the way to adulthood. But generally, we don't think that's a good idea because we have found that children raised in orphanages, when they get out of them, they don't tend to fare so well. They really struggle, and children should be raised in the family. Orphanages also are very expensive, and if you're going to, we have seen a lot of horror stories where Africans don't really have a high understanding or ethic about raising children that are not of your bloodline. They don't really understand adoption or raising some other man's baby unless it's family. And so it's very difficult to hire Africans and hire them in order to take care of other children in an orphanage. And if you don't really watch these orphanages very closely, you will find that the caretakers in the orphanages are pocketing all the money, and the kids are basically almost starving and not being taken care of. Even many of them die. And I've seen lots and lots of horror stories like that. So we're really not in favor of long-term orphan care. It's just very expensive, and it doesn't work well. So this is a temporary solution to families that are just not prepared to take in a child. We will take in a child temporarily for 2 or 3 years, and maybe up to the point that the child is weaned, and then the extended family can better care for that child. So when we get a child, we start working, we reach out and try to contact the extended family and begin to work with them and prepare them in order to take in these children. And I don't believe that we should do for Zambians what Zambians can do for themselves. And of course, they're willing to let us raise their children if we're willing to and relieve them of their responsibility. But I don't feel that we should do that. I think the best thing is to get those children back with the extended family and let the extended family raise them to adulthood. A final thing that Karen does do is work with children who have urgent needs or become very sick and need some real special medical attention. Sometimes you'll help them get into the hospital and see after them. In certain cases, she's able to help them in various ways, like Ryan, who was born deaf and blind. We were able to raise the money and got an operation for him so that he is now able to see. We couldn't do anything about his hearing, but as a deaf child, he'll have a fairly normal life. But deaf and blind, he probably would have died before now. Those children don't survive. But he's now 8 or 9. He's healthy and doing very well and living with his extended family, and we were able to plant a church in his village of Chapapa because of the work that we did with him and his family. Um, Karen also has some children like Carol, who has cerebral palsy. Carol is 10, 11 years old now. She couldn't even sit up. In these cases, the families just kind of leave the child laying in bed or on the dirt floor 24/7, and they just kind of feed the child, and the child just lays there. Well, Karen began to work with the mother, teaching her about some physical therapy and talking about nutritional food to help strengthen Carol's muscles. Karen also was able to buy a chair. Looks like a high chair, and it does function as a high chair, but it serves two purposes. It helps strengthens Carol's muscles so she can learn to sit up, and it in the meantime provides a way for her to sit up so she's not just laying on the floor on her back 24/7 a day. And so there's a lot of children that Karen has cared for through the years. Too many pictures of them to show you here, but there's a lot of children that Karen has saved through the years whose lives most of these children would not still be alive if it wasn't for this ministry. Some recent additions I can share with you. The child over on the left is a child whose mother died, I think soon right after childbirth, and the father is caring for the baby, but Karen is providing baby formula for this child. The child in the middle is a twin who survived a premature birth. The brother died, but this child survived, and Karen is providing baby formula for this child because the mother is not able to nurse. The child on the right was born premature to a teenage mother who got no prenatal care, and the child was born with some defects, was born without an ear, as you can see, slightly can see in this picture. Karen has placed this child in our care facility, which right now is her own house until we get the baby house fixed and registered and up and running. But Karen has placed this child in her care facility, and this child is also receiving baby formula. The teenage mother is too young and totally unable to care for this child, so Karen will be working with the extended family trying to make plans in order to eventually place this child back with the extended family. And so that's the ministry that Karen is involved in. And just a little family news for Karen. Karen has 4 children now, 2 who have been adopted, Zane and Susan, and then her biological children, she has 2 of them, Lucando, who is 2.5 now, almost 3, and Nalukinda, who was born on April 11th of this year, 2018. She was born. So Karen has now 4 children of her own. Another ministry that we have is our educational ministry. This is a ministry that a ministry that Lori has developed, because Lori is a elementary school teacher and has her master's in education. One half of the people of Africa, one half of the population of Zambia is under 18 years of age. But the problem is Zambia is a very poor country, and they can't afford to train enough teachers and hire enough teachers and pay their salaries and build enough schools and maintain those schools. And Zambia has a serious problem with corruption, and it's centralized, which means accountability is from the top, which really means there's no local accountability. And the teachers are not accountable to the local community, and so half the time they don't even show up for school, which is a big problem. So education in Zambia is really a big problem. And if Zambians don't educate their young, you have to ask, what's the future for Zambia? They're always going to remain a poor country at the bottom of the ladder. So this is a huge need. And we believe that the solution is that villages need to start their own community schools, fund them themselves, and then that will provide some local accountability to the school teachers, and it will be a step towards improving the quality of education in Zambia. So we have built our own primary school. We have grades K through 7 with about 150 to 200 students, which we should have in 2019. We had to start our own primary school for several reasons. One, there is a huge community need in our area. We're in a a kind of a new area. It's out in the bush, but it's quickly growing. We're 20 miles from Lusaka, but the capital of the country. But Lusaka is fast moving towards where we are located, though we're still very much out in the rural area. Our community, though, is fast growing, but there's no school in a 15-mile radius of our campus. Well, that raised a real problem, not only for the community, the kids that are moving into our area, but it also raised a serious problem as to where will the children of our staff and our students go to school. We have over 65 kids on our campus, and there's no school for them to go to. So we had to start our own school for that reason alone. But then there's a third reason, and that is by having our own primary school, it gives us a way to give our students and their wives practical training, practical experience in learning how to be school teachers and teaching them how to go, how that they can go home and start a community school in their church building and even serve as the community school teacher in those schools, which will greatly help the community. It might even produce a little income for our students so they can do ministry, but it will really elevate the influence that our students will have in the local villages when they go back and start schools and meet this great need that's in the community. It will provide a great service to the community, which is part of our plan to equip our students for holistic rural ministry. Here is a picture of some of our school children in 2018. We have 6 primary school teachers. A lot of what Lori does when she is in Zambia is she spends a lot of time working with our teachers, teaching them how to teach and how to teach critical thinking skills. The training for school teachers in Zambia is not very good, so we have taken these 6 people, hired them as school teachers, and Lori is training them how to be effective school teachers and supplementing their own teacher training. So our primary school is a very good primary school. The quality of education is far above what you will find in most of the schools of Zambia. One of the programs that we started recently was a school lunch program, and we're excited about this program because we began to realize that a lot of the kids that are coming from the community are coming from a nearby potato farm. And these children, we noticed that they don't run around at recess and kick the football, the soccer ball. They don't laugh a lot. They seem lethargic. They weren't doing so well in school. And so we thought we would start a school lunch program, and we came up with a recipe that allows us to cook a high protein enriched meal for $6 a day. Lori calls it porridge, but for $6 a day, which is about the cost of feeding buying lunch at school here in the United States. So for the cost of one American kid, we can feed 120 children a good high protein enriched meal every day. And so when we started giving this to the children, it didn't take long, and we noticed the children started acting like children again. They were laughing, they were out playing at recess, kicking the soccer ball, and they started, and suddenly we noticed their academic performance improved. So it's amazing with children that are so malnourished when they get protein in their system, and it really has a great impact. And we love doing things like this, finding a need and solving that and meeting that need with very little money. And this is one of those programs for just a few dollars a month. We're able to feed children, and these children won't get sick as much, and that will also increase school attendance and academic performance. So we're really excited about that ministry. Another area that we have worked in is in healthcare. We have in the past done lots of medical missions and dental missions, but we've kind of moved away from that in recent years because medical missions can be very expensive. And we have found that it would be better for us if we focused in on preventive medicine and trained our students and their wives in preventive medicine. So we teach our students a lot about nutrition and agriculture program, which I'm going to discuss in a minute. But we teach them nutrition and food preservation and malaria prevention, sanitation, HIV prevention. Lori teaches a class to our students and their wives called Where There Is No Doctor, so they get to understanding some basic medicine, and they're able to even find ways to treat a lot of the illnesses and at least diagnose a lot of the illnesses that affect Zambians. You know, generally 75-80% of what ails people in Zambia is the same old 6 or 7 things that just keep repeating. And you know, and as far as sanitation, you know, and malaria, just teaching them how to get rid of standing water in their villages, and teaching them how not to get their drinking water downstream from where they're washing their clothes and bathing, and where the animals are getting into the stream to get drinking water. And you know, it's amazing how many times I find people getting their drinking water from all this contamination that's upstream. And also teaching them some things they can do to in certain cases where the water is contaminated, how to treat water so that it will not be so unhealthy for them. And then we also have an optical clinic. We had a brother a few years ago that gave us $14,000 in order to buy an auto refractor kit, and Lori has been trained in how to use this. So this equipment, this kit, auto refractor kit, it allows you to read people's eyes, to give them an eye exam. It prints out a prescription, and we can take it over to our container where we have about 10,000 donated eyeglasses, and we can match that prescription with a pair of glasses, and we give these to people. And it's really exciting to see people that are 50, 60 years old or more and give them their first pair of prescription eyeglasses. And you know, we had one man, we gave him glasses, and he looked around and he says, oh, the trees have leaves on them. And he had never seen the leaves on the tree. He didn't really know what that was. One older man, we gave him a pair of big old women's pink glasses out of the 70s, and you know, he put them on them and his eyes bugged out, and he looked over at his wife and he says, oh, I have married a beautiful woman. And he said it in a way it was like he had never really seen his wife before. I'm glad he thought she was beautiful, but you know, that's an exciting ministry. And again, that's something we can do that costs very, very little. We don't run this optical clinic all the time. We just do it periodically. And we also can give people eye exams and give those that need reading glasses a pair of reading glasses to help as well. Now let me focus the rest of this presentation on our Bible college, because it is the primary component of our ministry, the heart and soul of it. Here is a picture of our current teaching staff. Boniface and his wife Jean are two of our older teachers, and they're a married couple, and Jean works in our women's program. Boniface is a spiritual leader. We also have an older man, Musanda, who teaches, and those three help provide some age, because age is very respected in Zambia, and they help a lot in our spiritual development. Bright serves as our director. He was trained at a Bible college in Swaziland, along with a new man that we have just hired named Dennis, who is going to join our teaching staff in January. So we right now have the best teaching staff that we have ever had in the 14 years that we have been in Zambia. And by the way, a lot of what I do when I'm in Zambia is I will teach a class in the morning to our students every day, of the week. I will teach a class to our students. But in the afternoons, I spend a lot of time working with my teaching staff to try to help them in developing further education, and preparing them and training them in how to teach classes that they're teaching. I give them resources that and class notes I type up and work and give them to them to help them to teach the classes they're teaching. I do a lot of training and trying to help them to understand what our goals are and how we need to be going about teaching and training to accomplish our mission statement. So I spend a lot of time. Lori spends a lot of time with the primary school teachers, but I spend a lot of time with teacher development for our Bible school teachers. Now, in the 14 years that we have been in Zambia, we have had over 500 graduates that have gone through our program. But in about 3 years ago, we started a new program. It's a 3-year training program, and we want 85% of our students to be married, and the wives must attend. If the wives do not stay, then the student cannot stay. The wives have to come, and they have to attend our women's training program, because we believe that training the wives is just as important as training the husbands. Because one reason women are, as it turns out, are the primary means through which innovation and new information spreads throughout most of Africa. When men are taught something, they have a tendency just to keep it for themselves, because information is something you use to make money with or sell or to elevate yourself. But women want to feed their kids, and they share information a whole lot more readily than men. So we want the wives to be involved in a lot of training. And there's a lot of things that we teach the women that we don't teach the men that's important to helping women in their families and in raising children and in the responsibilities that women have. Here is a picture of the student wives that we had in 2018, a picture of our first-year students in 2018, and this is a picture of our second and third-year students that were enrolled in 2018. Now, we had our first graduating program in November of 2018. This is our first graduating class from our new 3-year training program for married students. So we were very happy with this. We only had 9 men and their wives to graduate from our program. The reason is we only had 9 because 3 years ago we didn't have enough housing for more than 9 students. But now we have, as you'll see in a minute, we have a lot more housing, and this year's new student intake in January of 2019, for example, will be 17 new students. So future graduating classes will be much larger. One of our graduates who just graduated a couple of weeks ago, Paul and Jovu, returned home, and within a week he sent us a report with some pictures showing us that he had gone home, and immediately he had taken the $100 that we gave each of our students to start their chicken business. We sent him home with $100. He had gone home, had already fixed up his chicken house, bought his first batch of chickens, and had started his chicken business. So we were really happy to see our students starting to put into practice the things that we have taught them. Now, regarding the student housing, we have 6 blocks of student houses. Each block of apartments has 5 apartments. And so this gives us a total of 6 blocks, which gives us a total of 30 married student apartments. Now, these apartments have 3 rooms each, and they don't have indoor toilets or kitchens. Those are outside because we do not want to increase the standard of living of our students. Our students are coming from rural areas, from the bush, small villages, and the standard of living is very low, and we don't want to increase their standard of living because then they're not going to be so happy to return home. So we don't have indoor plumbing. They do have light bulbs inside, but that's about it. There are just 3 rooms for these students. We also have a small dorm that will hold up to 12 single students. So when you add up all our students and their wives, we have about 65 to 70 students in total, which includes the student wives as well. Now, of course, the Bible College is one of the principal things that we do is teach Bible courses. Our students are in class every morning, but I want to emphasize one very important point. By far, our number one priority is to develop spiritual leaders. That is the number one focus of our whole entire program. If we don't do anything else right, we want to do that right. And I'm showing you a couple of pictures here. This is our small, went too quick there. This is our small classroom building. It was the first building that we built on the campus. And then we have a second classroom, which is our auditorium. It is a large building, 110 feet long by 50 feet wide. It has a kitchen and toilets. We can use this building for worship on Sunday morning, for student fellowships, church gatherings, lectureships, workshops, marriages. We can even, in the future, we may even rent this out to try to generate a little income to help support the college, because we can rent this out to workshops and seminars and weddings and lots of things like that. So it is a multi-purpose building. It isn't fully finished yet because we don't exactly, it's functional, but we're not all that concerned about how it looks. It is functional, it works, it's structurally sound, but this building is very vital. We do all kinds of things in this building, and of course this is where we have our combined classes. When we have first, second, and third years all together, we can pull them together to have combined classes. Now, our goal, as I said earlier, is we want to develop self-supporting spiritual leaders. So that means that spiritual formation becomes a very important component of our training. So how do you go about developing spiritual leaders? I mean, what is necessary for spiritual formation or spiritual transformation? And I've come up with, this is the hardest thing I've ever tried to do, is to figure out how to do this. It is easy to run people through a bunch of Bible classes and they pass the test and you give them a certificate, but that doesn't mean you have accomplished your goal. You don't know how they have developed personally in their spiritual life. So how do you bring about spiritual formation? I've come up with, after 10 years of researching this and studying, I've come up with 4 components that I think are necessary for spiritual formation. Number 1 is Bible knowledge. A knowledge of God and His will is paramount. But you see, Bible knowledge alone is not sufficient. Bible knowledge is the fuel for the fire, but it is not the fire. The fire is one's relationship to God and walking in step with the Spirit, to use the terminology of Romans, the 8th chapter. The fire is one's spiritual life, who they are in relationship to God spiritually. Now, Bible knowledge is critically important. It is the fuel for that fire. But you can teach people a lot of Bible knowledge, and they simply become hearers of the Word and not necessarily doers of the Word. And that's been a fundamental problem for Christianity from its beginning. There's something more that's needed than just teaching people a bunch of Bible. A second component I have come to realize is what I call practical training. You've got to give people a way to put into practice immediately what they have been learning from their Bible study. They need to quickly become doers of the Word. And if you don't give people that practical application pretty quickly, then that's when they learn to become hearers of the Word only, and never quite become doers of the Word, never really become obedient disciples. So it is very important to provide that practical training, putting into practice what you're learning, doing the will of God. So it's for that reason that our students go out every weekend, almost without fail. They go out every weekend into the local villages, and they go out there by bicycle, or they walk out to these villages. Sometimes for the far off places, we'll go out and drop them off in the truck, and they'll walk back. But our students go out and they get engaged in serving the people in the villages. They learn, they will pray with people who are sick, and they will help someone who's sick harvest their crops, and they just explore different ways that they can be of service in the community, and sharing some of the skills and knowledge that they're learning about, health care and other working with vulnerable children and other things that they've learned. They can put those into practice in those local villages. Then they also start working in the idea of what you could call evangelism, except we call it disciple making. We teach them how to make disciples. Now, as a result, we have always found that this has been a strong point in our training from the very beginning. We were very active in getting our students out doing evangelism. And as a result, we always have gotten lots of reports of our students baptizing lots of people and planting churches. In fact, it's too numerous to even count. We never even tried to count all of the churches planted and people who've been baptized into Christ. But our students learn by a lot of practice, they learn how to make disciples. In fact, we say we want to give our students so much practical experience that we actually rewrite their DNA so that when they go home, they cannot not make disciples. It becomes part of who they are. It becomes part of what it means to be a Christian. And we have had very good success in that component of our training. A third part is mentoring, spiritual mentoring. And that is very, very important to spiritual formation. This has to do with the personal application of the Word of God. And what we have found is that it is important for people to have a mentor. So our teachers not only teach Bible in a classroom and ministry skills and such in a classroom, but our teachers are very active working with our students in small groups and in one-to-one mentoring relationships. In fact, our teachers do more outside the classroom than they do in the classroom. That's because mentoring is so vital to spiritual formation. And what we have found is that when students get in small groups, that gives them a chance to talk together with 5 or 6 other students about what they're learning in the Bible, what's standing out to each of them, and they share that, and then they can talk about, well, what does this mean to us, and how does this challenge us to change our lives, or to go back to our village and to change the way people live in the local villages. And they need that peer-to-peer discussion and self-discovery that takes place in a small group. But then we have found our students need one-on-one mentoring with a teacher, with a student who works with them and asks them mostly just questions. What are you learning in class? What does this mean to you? How are you going to apply this? How are you applying it? What plans of implementation do you have? How are you coming along in your application of this to your life? Or have you done anything? And those questions help provide some sense of accountability to our students as they try to grapple with the implications of the Bible and apply it to their own personal life and their spiritual growth with the Lord. By the way, one more thing about practical training that I forgot to mention. We have found that when people take what they're learning in the classroom and go out and apply it, that it actually reinforces what they're learning in the classroom. It is sort of what you have probably heard in marriage counseling, what they call fake it till you make it. For an example, there's a man who doesn't really feel love towards his wife and doesn't feel like doing loving things for his wife. But if you can convince that husband to just start doing it, whether he feels like it or not, just start, showing love, doing love, showing love to his wife in practical ways. After a while, having done these things, suddenly he starts having loving feelings towards his wife. So what we have found is by doing actually gets your attitudes and your feelings and beliefs in line with what your behavior does. In many ways, it is not learning that influences behavior, but it's more behavior that influences beliefs and attitudes, which is an amazing thing that we have learned through our experience in trying to train students. And then finally, the fourth component I want to mention is worship. This has to do with one's relationship to God, and this involves both public and private worship. It's very important that our students get together and worship and focus on God. We were created in the image of God, and it's vital that we focus on God and who God is, and worshiping God and expressing thanks to God and gratitude. And the more we focus on God, the more clearly we see who we were created to be in His image. It's transformative to focus on God, and God certainly needs to be the center of our daily lives. So worship is very important, both public and private, because we work with our students to implement spiritual disciplines that will help them in their private devotional time and prayer, personal and personal Bible study to to focus on their personal relationship with the Lord. So these are four essential components to spiritual transformation. And by the way, I think these are things that we really desperately need to implement in our American churches if we want to see our membership grow spiritually. It is not enough just for members of the church to come to church 4 times a week and hear 3 times a week and hear 4 hours of Bible teaching sitting on the pew. That's a good way of teaching people to be hearers of the word and not doers of the word. We really need to think about how we are going about developing mechanisms to help our members here in the U.S. to grow spiritually. And I think these are 4 areas that we need to apply to churches here in the United States as well. Now, going further with our mission statement, we want to develop self-supporting spiritual leaders. We want them to be self-supporting. One of the big problems in Africa is that churches don't have the money and the resources to support full-time ministries, full-time ministers. And if we train men to go out and be full-time preachers, then what happens? They go out to those churches, and those churches can't pay them, and they start preaching about nothing but money, and they kind of start stealing from the church treasury, and all kinds of bad things happen. And what we found in Africa is that preachers often become a major burden to the churches and cripple the ministries of the churches. We also don't think it's a good thing at all for preachers to get support from America. I can go on all day about why that's a bad thing. Lots of horror stories about preachers who get American support. Furthermore, there's just not enough money in America in churches, American churches, to support all the preachers throughout the rest of the world, especially in the third world countries. So it's vital that we teach our students ways that they can support themselves in ministry. And that's why we decided to train rural men for ministry from the rural areas to go back to the rural villages, because in training our students in being self-supporting, it makes a big difference on whether they go to rural areas or they go to urban type areas. If you're training men to go to the rural areas, you can train them in agriculture. But if you're training them to go into urban areas, in townships in Africa, then you're going to have to train them with all kinds of other skills. It could be woodworking or carpentry or mechanics, auto mechanics, or accounting, or any number of job skills. And that starts getting expensive and difficult to do, especially in Zambia. So that is one of the reasons why we felt that given our abilities economically, at least at this time, that we would just focus on training men for rural ministry. And so that's why agriculture training is such an important component of our training program at Daybreak. One of our Bible school teachers is an agriculture teacher. Francis was trained in a 2-year agriculture program, a very good training program that's been going on for 50 years by Klaus Mueller down in southern Zambia, who's a member of the Church of Christ, and he's doing a great program. And Francis was trained by Klaus Mueller, and he does all the agricultural teaching for our students. So we teach our students how to dig raised beds, which is a matter of digging a trench about 50 feet long, which is about 1.5 feet deep. You teach them how to do composting, and they then put that compost in the bottom of the raised bed, which provides fertilizer for up to 3 or 4 years. You then cover that up with dirt, which when you do the compost and the dirt makes a raised bed. Now you can plant 2 rows of vegetables on each raised bed, and you get a bucket, put it up on some sticks with 2 drip lines that come out of it. Those drip lines have little holes in them, and this enables people in Zambia to grow vegetables year-round. Because in Zambia it rains only 4.5 months out of the year. They get absolutely no rain the other 7 months out of the year. But in Zambia, the temperature doesn't vary all that much, which means they can grow vegetables year-round if they have water. And that is the challenge, because in Zambia, most of our students have to walk 3 or 4 or 5 miles to get water. That is the reason for drip irrigation, because it is the most economical use of water. And if our students can fill just 4 of these buckets per day, that's enough to grow enough vegetables to more than adequately feed your family throughout the entire year. In fact, you can grow some and sell to your neighbors and make money from it. If you can just fill 4 buckets, it's the most economical use of water. And these are just some pictures I'm showing you of our students' gardens that they have where we're training them how to raise vegetables. Now, when our students arrive, we feed them for the first 3 months while they start getting their gardens going and their chickens started, and I'll say something about that in a second. But it takes about 3 months for them to get their farming operations up and going, and after 3 months we stop feeding them, which thereafter they're self-supporting. Now that helps lower our costs of operation in Zambia, because we're trying as best we can to make our ministry as self-supporting and least depending on American support that we can. That helps reduce our operational costs, but more importantly, it is the best way to ensure that our students master the skills that we're teaching them and gain confidence. And by the time our students graduate after 3 years of doing this, they know how to do this very well and have great confidence in knowing how to go back to their village and start growing raised beds and growing their vegetables and raising chickens. Now that's the other component. We teach our students how to raise chickens as a business. Now they know how to raise village chickens, which, you know, are chickens, a few chickens they have on their property that run around and scrounge for their own food, and they never feed them. But those chickens are real tough and stringy, and you can't really sell them. So teaching them the business of raising chickens is a real challenge, because you got to teach them a lot of business skills that may seem common sense to us, but they're basic business principles about how to do business that they don't really have knowledge of in Zambia, because you see, Zambians really weren't raised to be capitalist. They've kind of grown up to be subsistent farmers, meaning you just grow enough food to survive. They don't know how to raise vegetables and chickens in order to make some money and to sell as a business. So we teach them, you have to teach them basic business skills, and then teach them how to raise chickens for profit. Our first year students, they raise 50, we're hoping to increase that to 100 chickens, but they grow 50 to 100 chickens every 7 weeks. The second year students grow more than 100 to 150 chickens every 7 weeks. And our third year students, in a chicken house we just finished a few months ago, our third year students grow between 200 and 300 chickens every 7 weeks. So they start small and they increase each year in the number of chickens that they grow, so that each year they're gaining greater skills in the business of raising and selling chickens. And so this next year in 2019, we're hoping to build 2 more chicken houses, because we need to increase the volume of chickens that our students are growing, because they're really not making enough profit yet from their chickens, and that's going to require a greater volume to better support the students while they're attending school. So we're also teaching our students not only so they can be self-supporting, but we also want our students to learn these skills so well that when they go back to their villages after graduating, they're going to be able to teach others in their villages how to farm and be able to grow food for themselves year-round using drip irrigation and growing chickens for protein. This is part of our desire to equip our students for holistic rural ministry. We don't want them just to be able to support themselves, but we want them to teach these skills to the people in their villages. And in my opinion, that's how we solve the problem of malnutrition in Zambia, and the problem of so many children dying at a young age. Is they need to learn how to better feed themselves. And we have tried to teach, we've tried to go into villages and do workshops and demonstration farms to teach these skills in the villages, but we have found it doesn't work very well. Really the best way to teach people in the village new skills about farming is you need to teach a Zambian and train him thoroughly and equip him with the knowledge and the confidence of how to farm, so that when he goes back to his village, it's a Zambian teaching other Zambians instead of Americans trying to teach them. And they don't listen to us Americans because they think that we know how to do everything, but they don't know how to do anything. And they think the skills that we teach them will work for us, but they won't work for them. And there's a long history of Americans and Europeans going to Africa trying to teach new skills, and they never seem to work. So they don't really listen to us anymore. The best way to teach people in the villages is to train a Zambian with the necessary skill and teach him, perfect his skills, so that when he goes back to the village over the next 5 to 10 years, he can start teaching and demonstrating to the people in his village how that they also can apply these new skills to their life. So it's very important to teach our students these skills very, very well, so they will be able to go back and be able to teach these skills to the people in their villages. And so, kind of to summarize our training for holistic ministry in our Bible college is we're of course teaching them ministry and teaching them disciple making skills. We're teaching them agricultural skills. We're teaching our students how to start a community school in their village, and maybe how to serve as a village community school teacher. The students and their wives can be school teachers. We're teaching them how to work with vulnerable children and maybe how to organize the people in their villages to respond to the needs of orphans and vulnerable children in their villages. We're teaching them basic health care, basic medicine and preventive health care and nutrition and HIV prevention and malaria prevention, and all these skills that they'll be able to go back to their village. And we're also, one more thing I haven't mentioned yet, and that is training in marriage and the family. You would not believe the problems that are in African families. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but part of it is that Zambia, like most of Africa, has moved from arranged marriages that were arranged by their parents. Now they have moved to what they call love marriages, which is where the husband and wife choose who they're going to marry for themselves. Young people choose for themselves who they want to marry, but they've not yet developed the relational skills nor the means to really get to know one another before they're married. They don't really get to know each other before marriage, because even when they choose somebody, they go back to their parents, and their parents then arrange the deal, and then they get married, but they still don't spend a whole lot of time getting to know each other or knowing who they're going to marry. And so we see a lot of good people who married very poorly, and that then causes a lot of problems for their ability to serve as spiritual leaders. We see this a lot. And then there's just all kinds of problems that they have in marriage because they haven't yet learned relational skills. They're marrying for love and romance, but they haven't learned the relational skills that are necessary to build loving relationships in marriage. Men still look at women the same way they always have, as a piece of property. In fact, in most African languages, the word to marry is the same word as to buy something. So you buy a tomato, you buy a cow, you buy a wife. And that tells you a whole lot about the way African men look at women. And they also have this feeling that if a woman doesn't obey you, and that's women should obey their husbands, and I mean like little dictators, their wives should obey them. But if the wife doesn't obey them, then you should beat them until they do. Well, that certainly doesn't create much love and romance and intimacy in a marriage. So people are now marrying in Africa with high expectations, but they can't ever realize those expectations. And as a result, they're very dissatisfied. And when you marry by choice, you can also unmarry by choice. And so we're having a real high rate of abandonment and desertion and divorce in Africa. So we've also noticed when we started bringing married couples onto our families, that's when we really started realizing how bad the marriages in Africa are, because our students and their wives they bring with them all these problems. And one of our couples, Boniface and his wife Jean, who teaches in our women's program. They're an older couple, and Boniface and his wife spend almost every night of the week counseling our married students in marriage counseling. So this is a great need, and so we're trying to teach our students a lot about marriage and the family, teaching them these relational skills so that when they go back to the village, they'll not only have better marriages and be able to model good Christian marriage, but they'll also know these skills to teach to other married couples, especially younger people, before they ever get married. And that will really make a difference in the villages in terms of marriages, or at least marriages in the future for young couples. So that's kind of describes our holistic training, where we're trying to equip our students for holistic rural ministry. It has both the spiritual and the physical components of training our students for ministry, both for the physical and the spiritual sides of ministry. Now, in the last segment here of this presentation, before I close, I just want to show you some pictures of our campus. You realize we've only really been on this campus for 4 years, so most everything that I'm fixing to show you has only been built and developed in the last 4 years. This is the way our campus looked in 2012 when we purchased this 50-acre property. It was nothing but bush. We had to clear it, and this is what it looks like today after we have built it. One of the first things we did was put a 6-foot security fence around the entire 50 acres. We have drilled 4 water wells that go down 250 feet, which gives us plenty of water for all our agriculture and for good, clean drinking water. We have about 8 or 9 of these water tanks that have developed our water system. We bought a machine that called Hydroform. That will make blocks out of dirt. You get dirt. It has to have a certain percentage of clay in it, which the dirt in our area does. So you get the dirt, you mix it with 15% cement, put some water in it, and you mix that cement in with the dirt. You then put the dirt into this machine, which is basically a compression chamber, and when it comes up out of the compression chamber, it has little ridges on it, and it's made so it's an interlocking block. After it cures, it takes about 2 weeks to cure it, and you can take that block, and when you go to build, you just stack them like Legos. Now, we do have to use cement in the foundation, but after that, we don't have to use cement, and that drastically cost of our construction, and that's one of the reasons why we've been able to build so many buildings so quickly. No one is building buildings cheaper than we are, I don't think, anywhere in the world. I'm buying all the materials ourselves. We make these blocks out of dirt, which we can make 1,500 blocks per day using that machine. And then we just build them quickly, and I hire workers at minimum wage. And as I said, we buy all the materials, and they can build this quickly and quite cheaply. And so I kind of joke and say we're building our campus dirt cheap. Now, these blocks may be made out of dirt, but they are solid blocks, and they'll last for 100 years or more. They're very solid blocks. So let me show you some of our campus. In the middle of our campus is the small classroom building, which was one of the first buildings that we built on campus. We then have built the auditorium, which I showed you earlier, that is located on the one side of our campus. The dorm is for single students is located on the left lower corner of our campus, along with the married student apartments, which I said earlier we have 30 of these apartments. The student gardens are located right next to the student houses, as well as the student chicken houses. So the gardening and the chickens are all located right there near our students. That's so they can guard their chickens in their gardens from thieves, because even though we have a security fence, we sometimes people jump that fence or dig under it. So that's for security purposes, but it also helps them to stay alert and stay on top of taking care of their gardens and their chickens. We have an area that we have set aside for a Daybreak farm. This is an area that we're hoping in maybe a year or two we can start developing. Maybe we can raise chickens. tomatoes by drip irrigation, maybe bees or aquaponics or raise pigs. We're looking at what can we do to try to develop some farming operations that could be able to generate some kind of income to help us to become less dependent long term on American support. Now, it's a major challenge to see if we can do this. We're not sure we can, but we want to try. We already have built one chicken house that has a capacity for 3,000 chickens, but we're looking at the possibility of building enough chicken houses to raise maybe 10 to 15,000 chickens every 7 weeks. We then have an area called Campus Central, and in this area we have just finished building a new office building. It is offices for our Bible college teaching staff, as well as for our business and administration. We have a few people like our financial officer that are working in the overall ministry and daily operations, and we have a few offices for them. But in the middle is a classroom building. We have just finished that building in December of 2018, and that's what it looks like right now. And as I make this video, our staff are now moving into these new offices. We have a workshop where we can do all our construction and agricultural equipment and woodworking and welding and just about anything under the sun. We have a workshop that can do it. We have a small grocery store, and our optical clinic is also located in this container. But our little grocery store is so our students don't have to walk, and our staff don't have to walk 7 kilometers, which is about 5 miles away, in order to get buy things they need from the grocery store. Eventually, though, I do hope to build a proper little grocery store, kind of a general store, in fact, that will supply everything that we need, and will be able to open it up to the general public, because there's no grocery store or general store in our whole area. People have to walk 7 kilometers, 5 miles or more in order to get to the grocery store. So there's a real need for this, and I think if we were to build a general store, that we could even earn a little income from that to be able to help support this ministry. Again, trying to find ways that we can reduce our financial dependence on the United States. We also have a grinding mill that can grind corn into millie meal, because even though I wish they would eat something more than shima, corn, that's still the staple for Zambia. And so we have a grinding mill. We go out to the local farmers and we buy corn in mass and in bulk, and then when we can grind that, we have 2 grinding machines in this little building. We can grind that, which involves a dehusker and a grinding mill, but we can make millie meal and sell it at half price to our students and our staff members, which helps them a great deal. But we're also hoping that we can eventually open this up to the general public, because there's a huge need for this. The nearest grinding mill is over 5 miles away, and that one doesn't work half the time. We're hoping to be able to put this into operation to the general public, and we can, again, another way that we can earn a little revenue from operations here on our campus to help support the ministry. The primary school is located by the main gate as you come into the campus, and next to the primary school on the top right corner of the property is Karen's house, and then next to her is the children's care facility, or baby house as we call it. Next to Karen's kids ministry is the housing for our Bible college teachers. These are simple 3-bedroom houses. They do have electricity and water and toilets and kitchens inside, but we have 5 of these houses so far that we have built for our teaching staff. We also have a couple of houses that are for senior staff, and there's one house that we use right now for a visitor house, because when we have visiting teachers or visitors from the United States, we have a nice 3-bedroom house with a kitchen and hot water that our visitors are able to stay in while they are visiting us. Lori and I have our house on the lower right-hand corner of the property, and as we look towards 2019, we're needing to build 2 more chicken houses. We need to add some more classrooms to our primary school, because 2 or 3 of our classes are meeting in combined classes. In other words, we have grade 5 and 6 meeting in one room. We need to build 2 or 3 more classrooms for our primary school. We need to build some additional houses for our Bible teachers as well. And so that's what we're hoping that we'll have the funds to do in the near future. So that kind of summarizes our ministry in Zambia, describing how we're trying to make a long-term difference in Zambia for the kingdom of God. We're trying to train self-supporting spiritual leaders who are equipped for holistic rural ministry. And I think in this presentation I have explained how we're trying to achieve each little component of that mission statement. Training them to be self-supporting through agriculture, how we're trying to develop them as spiritual leaders, and how we're trying to equip them for holistic rural ministry that involves both the spiritual and the physical components of ministry. I want to thank all of you who are helping to support this ministry, because we cannot do this ministry without your financial support and your support in prayer and encouragement. We're very thankful for all of you who are supporting this ministry, and we pray that God will continue to bless you in your lives and in your ministry. Thank you for listening to this presentation.